Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our listeners. I hope you are all doing well and staying resilient in these increasingly unpredictable and turbulent times. This is the visual that is haunting the glass-walled boardrooms of the Big Three in Detroit this morning. It is an image that no amount of corporate spin, no amount of frantic rallies, and no amount of optimistic PR statements can fix. If you look at the live logistics feeds and the heavy-duty shipping manifests from the Great Lakes ports today, you will see something that defies the laws of modern industrial economics. It is a cold morning, and the silence coming from the Canadian border is absolutely deafening. Usually, these channels are the beating heart of global commerce, moving thousands of tons of high-grade aluminum, the white gold of the 21st century, directly into the hungry assembly lines of Michigan and Ohio. Today, they are ghost towns at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. A coordinated shift in trade policy from Ottawa has officially made landfall on American soil, and the speed of this escalation is nothing short of terrifying. The aluminum strike has morphed from a simple tariff dispute into a global economic weapon of mass destruction. They are calling it the new North American trade war, and unlike traditional government sanctions which take months to negotiate and years to bite, this is hitting the American electric vehicle sector instantly: the speed is terrifying because it targets the one thing America cannot manifest out of thin air: raw material sovereignty. Before we dive into the heart of this industrial collapse, if you value deep independent analysis and staying ahead of the global shifts that affect your future and your pocketbook, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with those who need to understand the real world behind the headlines. Your support allows us to keep bringing the truth to light. Now, let us look at why the ground is shaking beneath the feet of the auto giants and why the future of the American car just hit a brick wall that may never be torn down. The reality of the situation is that the American electric vehicle dream was built on a fragile foundation of cheap, accessible Canadian aluminum. For decades, we operated under the comfortable, perhaps even arrogant, assumption that our northern neighbor would always be the stable, quiet provider of the materials we needed to innovate and dominate. But that assumption died this morning. Canada's decision to hike prices and restrict supply has created a 90% disruption in projected material deliveries for Ford and General Motors. This isn't just a bump in the road. It's a surgical strike on the very chemistry of the American economy. To build a modern EV, you need aluminum for the chassis to keep it light, for the battery casings to keep it safe, and for the cooling systems to keep it efficient. Without it, you aren't building a car. You're building a multi-ton, high-tech paperweight. The Make America Go Away sentiment that we've seen in global markets has now entered the industrial heartland with a vengeance. We are watching a stress test of our entire economic sovereignty. The Canadian government's move to prioritize domestic reserves over long-standing export deals has left Detroit in a state of absolute, unmitigated chaos. They are calling it crisis mode because, quite frankly, there is no plan B. You cannot pivot a billion-dollar assembly line that was designed for specific material grades overnight. You cannot replace 1,000 miles of pipeline and rail with a wish. The foundation of the Green Revolution in America hasn't just been cracked. It has been demolished by the very allies we thought were our closest partners. This is the beginning of a cold era for the American worker, where the materials for their survival are now being used as leverage in a game they never asked to play. To understand the gravity of this trade war, we must look at the historical context of Detroit's extreme vulnerability. We have spent the last 20 years outsourcing the messy and difficult parts of production, convinced that the globalist model would protect us from the volatility of nature and politics. But as we see today, globalism is a double-edged sword that has now been turned against the American throat. The Canadian aluminum hike is effectively a massive, unpayable tax on American innovation. It forces Ford and GM to choose between two impossible industry-ending options: either raise the price of an already expensive EV beyond the reach of the average American family, or continue production at a massive, unsustainable loss that will lead to certain bankruptcy and federal liquidation. This is asymmetric economic warfare in its purest form. It bypasses the traditional treaties and exploits the absolute systemic dependence of American factories on foreign raw materials. As the stock prices of the auto giants plunge in pre-market trading, dropping faster than they did in 2008, the realization is finally setting in: we have lost control of our own industrial destiny. The white gold of Canada is now more valuable than the gold sitting in the vaults of Fort Knox, because you can't build a sustainable middle class out of bullion, but you could have built it out of manufacturing. Now that door is being slammed shut, and the sound is echoing through every retirement fund and 401,000 that is tied to the American industrial complex. The internal memos leaking from the executive offices at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and the headquarters in Dearborn are filled with a sense of genuine, raw panic. We are seeing internal reports of indefinite halts on flagship projects like the F-150 Lightning and the Silverado EV projects that were supposed to be the symbols of a new American century. This is the deindustrialization of the United States happening in real time, triggered not by a war of tanks or missiles, but by a war of tariffs and commodity hoarding. The psychological toll on the American worker cannot be overstated. These men and women were told by politicians and CEOs alike that the EV transition was their ticket to long-term job security and a cleaner future. They spent years of their lives retraining, learning new systems, and investing in a vision that is now being held hostage by a trade dispute over molten metal. This breeds a level of distrust in the system that can lead to permanent social fragmentation. If the government cannot secure the basic materials needed for its own flagship industrial policies, then the system itself has failed in its primary duty. We are watching the credibility of the Made in USA brand melt away alongside the aluminum that should have been in our cars. It's a crisis of confidence that will take generations to repair, provided we even have the chance to rebuild. Let us talk about the financial contagion that is spreading from the border into the heart of Wall Street. This trade war isn't staying confined to the shipping docks. It is moving through the bond markets and the insurance agencies that back these massive multi-billion-dollar industrial projects. When the cost of a primary commodity like aluminum spikes by 40% or 50% overnight, every single contract in the supply chain becomes toxic. We are seeing what experts are calling a Bud Light moment for the entire automotive sector, but with much higher stakes. Once a supply chain becomes this unstable, investors don't just wait. They flee. They aren't just selling Ford stock. They are pulling back from the entire American manufacturing sector because they no longer see it as a safe bet. This creates a liquidity crisis that makes the 2008 crash look like a minor market correction. We are entering uncharted waters where the old maps of traditional economics are useless and the compass is spinning. If Canada continues to squeeze the supply while demand for EVs is forced by regulation, we are looking at a full-scale industrial depression in the Midwest by the end of the next quarter. The ripple effect will hit small parts suppliers, local dealerships, and the thousands of small towns that depend on the auto industry for their very existence. This is a fire that won't be put out by printing more money. Geopolitically, this move by Canada signals the definitive end of the special relationship that has defined the last century of North American peace. It shows that even our closest allies, the people we share a border and a language with, are now playing a zero-sum game. They see the internal divisions within the United States, the political chaos, the legal battles surrounding the highest offices, the crumbling physical infrastructure, and they are making the cold, rational decision to look out for themselves first. This is the fragmentation of the North American Economic Union. If Ottawa can decide the fate of American EVs with a single policy shift, then America is no longer the global superpower it claims to be. We are a customer that has run out of credit and out of options. The leverage has shifted north, and the terms of the New Deal are going to be incredibly painful for the American taxpayer. This is a wake-up call that we are no longer the only players on the board. The world has watched our internal struggles and decided that we are no longer the inevitable leader. The aluminum strike is just the first proof of this new, multipolar reality where America can be bullied by its own neighbors. The endgame for this crisis is a total and permanent realignment of the global automotive market. While Detroit is paralyzed by supply shortages and trade wars, foreign competitors are already moving in with surgical precision to fill the vacuum. They don't rely on the same fragile supply chains, and they are more than happy to sit back and watch the American giants crumble under the weight of their own dependencies. This is how empires fall, not with a dramatic bang, but with a quiet shortage of essential materials. We are seeing a historic seizing of the market. The fate of EVs isn't being decided in a high-tech laboratory in California or by a visionary entrepreneur. It's being decided in a government office in Ottawa and on the freezing docks of the St. Lawrence Seaway. The American dream of a clean, independent energy future is being held for ransom, and the price is higher than our current leadership seems able or willing to pay. We are looking at a future where the cars on American roads are no longer American, and the jobs that built them are gone forever, replaced by a permanent reliance on foreign powers who no longer fear our influence. As we wrap up this urgent analysis of the aluminum strike, we must ask ourselves, what is the next move for a nation? Cornered? History teaches us that cornered industries, much like cornered leaders, are prone to making dangerous, unpredictable moves. We should expect to see drastic measures in the coming days, executive orders, emergency subsidies that we can't afford, and perhaps even the invocation of the Defense Production Act. But you cannot manifest high-grade aluminum out of thin air through a decree. The reality is that we are in a period of profound transition and intense systemic risk. Stay safe, stay liquid, and prepare for a very different world than the one we were promised. The cars of the future might not be built in Detroit, and they might not be built at all if this trade war continues to escalate. If you found this analysis valuable in understanding the hidden forces at play, please make sure you have liked the video and subscribed to the channel. Your engagement is what keeps us going in this fight for transparency and economic truth. Share this with someone who needs to hear the truth about our industrial future. We will be monitoring the trade filings and the factory floors closely, and will bring you updates the moment the next domino falls. Detroit is at a turning point, and so is the nation. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next one.